In recent weeks, global media have increasingly published stories that until recently seemed unthinkable. Australia, one of the key allies of the United States in the Asia-Pacific region, is considering joining the BRICS bloc. This is not just rumor or speculation. Authoritative outlets such as the Financial Times, The Guardian Australia, and even America's Politico are reporting on it more openly, citing their own diplomatic sources. According to Australian journalists, behind closed doors in Canberra, arguments are being voiced with growing frequency that betting on Washington has ceased to bring benefits. The trigger has been the sharp deterioration of relations with the United States against the backdrop of Donald Trump's tariff policy. Continuing along the path of protectionism, the American president struck not only at China, but also at U.S. allies. The new tariffs on Australian aluminum, steel, and agricultural products have dealt a serious blow to the continent's economy, where exports play a crucial role. Insiders close to the office of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese say that in recent months, a serious split has emerged within the Australian government. Some ministers still insist on preserving the traditional alliance with the United States, but the camp of supporters of strategic autonomy, oriented toward deepening ties with China, India, and Russia, is gaining increasing influence. The situation is further aggravated by the fact that the United States itself is increasingly willing to sacrifice the interests of its allies for domestic political purposes. Trump bluntly stated in an interview with Fox News that America will no longer babysit even its friends if they are not ready to play by American rules. In Australia, this phrase was perceived as an insult. Moreover, according to Bloomberg sources, Chinese diplomats in recent months have stepped up their efforts in Canberra, offering Australia unique trade concessions and investment guarantees in exchange for closer cooperation within the BRICS Plus format. Outwardly, this is presented as an expansion of opportunities, but in reality, it is a strategic move that could alter the balance of power in the region. If Australia truly makes this choice, the United States risks losing a key ally in the Pacific Basin, a blow that would severely undermine the entire architecture of American security in the East. According to experts at the Lowy Institute in Sydney, Australia's drift toward BRICS looks increasingly logical, given that the country's economy already depends more on China than on the United States. More than 35% of Australian exports go to China, from iron ore to agricultural products. And when Trump began imposing tariffs on Australian goods, Beijing immediately took advantage of the situation, offering to expand purchases on preferential terms. China did what the United States missed. It extended its hand when Australia needed support, notes the South China Morning Post. What is striking is that this rhetoric is now heard not only in expert circles, but also within Australian business. The Australian Aluminium Council recently issued a statement directly warning that U.S. tariffs threaten thousands of jobs and undermine a partnership that has been built over decades. Meanwhile, American media report serious alarm inside the White House. According to the Washington Post, Trump's advisors are preparing emergency measures to keep Australia within the U.S. sphere of influence. Both diplomatic steps and new military agreements under the AUKUS alliance are being discussed. The problem, however, is that military guarantees no longer appear sufficient for Australia. According to insiders close to the country's Ministry of Defense, many senior officers are asking the question, if tomorrow the United States goes to war with China, must Australia automatically become a target? This very question is increasingly being raised in closed parliamentary hearings. Equally important is the fact that behind Canberra, the shadow of Beijing is looming ever larger. China is effectively backing the idea of Australia joining BRICS, promising multi-billion-dollar investments in infrastructure projects, ranging from ports to railways. Moreover, Australian media have increasingly reported on secret talks between representatives of Chinese state banks and the largest financial institutions in Sydney and Melbourne. Altogether, this resembles a strategic operation aimed at gradually pulling Australia into a new economic bloc led by China, Russia, and India. For the United States, the prospect of Australia shifting colors toward BRICS looks catastrophic. Analysts at Rand Corporation warn that losing this ally would undermine Washington's entire strategy of containing China in the region. Australia has hosted key American bases, including facilities for surveillance and satellite intelligence. But if Canberra begins to hedge between the United States and China, or worse, joins BRICS outright, Washington risks losing its load-bearing pillar in the Indo-Pacific strategy. Amid these developments, Donald Trump seems to underestimate the seriousness of the threat. In his speeches, he continues to emphasize a tough trade policy, insisting that allies must pay more for their partnership with America. Yet this very approach is increasingly backfiring. Australia, which for decades saw itself as part of the Western Club, is now looking east with growing interest. As political analyst Rory Medcalf observes, if Trump doesn't change his approach, Australia could become the first Western state to choose BRICS over Washington. Thus, a paradox is unfolding. In its drive to punish China, America is inadvertently pushing its own allies into Beijing's embrace. If this process is not halted in the coming months, the world may witness the most significant geopolitical shift in decades. What is especially telling is that China's strategy to draw Australia into BRICS is not built on direct pressure. Beijing is operating far more subtly, through economics, infrastructure, and culture. According to Nikkei Asia, several new investment programs have already been launched in Australia, with the participation of Chinese funds linked to the state-owned China Development Bank. These include multi-billion-dollar projects in green energy, port infrastructure, and high-speed rail. In Sydney and Melbourne, joint research centers are being established where Chinese companies collaborate directly with Australian universities. All of this is framed as a partnership for the future, but in practice it creates an economic dependence that will be difficult to break. At the same time, Beijing is actively shaping public opinion. Chinese media broadcasting in English are increasingly publishing stories portraying Australia not as a junior partner of the US, but as an independent power capable of leading in the Southern Pacific. In Canberra, voices are growing louder that BRICS membership would allow Australia to truly realize its potential rather than remain in America's shadow. According to Reuters sources, Chinese diplomats have already held several meetings with Australian trade unions and business associations, promising guaranteed contracts for Australian workers if the country joins BRICS. It is crucial to understand that this is not only about trade. China is offering Australia the role of a key supplier of raw materials and energy for the growing BRICS economies. Analysts at the Financial Review describe this as effectively a ticket into the club of nations set to control the future global resources market. And at a time when the United States is closing its markets with tariffs and Europe is sinking deeper into crisis, for Canberra the offer looks less like an alternative and more like an opportunity. Interestingly, even India, with which Australia has had a complicated past, is actively supporting the idea. According to The Hindu, New Delhi sees Australia's possible entry into BRICS as a way to strengthen the bloc's southern flank and create a counterweight to Western alliances. For India, this is a chance to secure the role of mediator between China and Australia, which in the future would allow New Delhi to position itself as a global architect of a new world order. Against this backdrop, anxiety in Washington is only growing. According to the Wall Street Journal, reports are already circulating within the U.S. National Security Council that examine the scenario of a partial loss of Australia. These documents explicitly warn that if Australia joins BRICS, the entire system of American alliances in the region could begin to collapse like a house of cards. After Canberra, other countries, from New Zealand to the Philippines, might follow suit. Thus, we are witnessing a rare case where U.S. domestic policy, Trump's tariffs, is triggering a chain reaction that could lead to global geopolitical shifts. And if Washington does not find a way to keep Australia within its orbit, then in the coming years, we may see an entirely new configuration of international relations, in which BRICS ceases to be a club of developing countries and transforms into a genuine alternative center of power, with Australia serving as its symbolic Trojan horse in the Western world.